Hey guys, I'm here, and this time I remembered to turn my microphone back on after my intro was over. So, guys, thank you for being here. I am just setting my last minute things up here, and we're going to get started. I'm going to go ahead and go live on Instagram. Here we go. All right. And I am good to go. I'm having to move a couple things around here, but we've got it under control. There we go. Here we go. Here we go. Sorry, guys. I'm having to move things around because I have way too many tabs open on my computer with all the things I'm having to read from everybody. So let's give some shout outs out here tonight. I know, Kristen, you know, it's always something with me. We've got Richard. Thank you. I like my intro too now. I'm getting kind of fancy there. We've got Emily on board sharing her amputation journey at the support group tonight. I know that there's a lot of people that can learn a lot from you, Emily. We've got Glenn coming in from Southeastern PA, currently bracing for an ice storm. Man, I guess I won't tell you how the weather's been over here lately for you and Tom, because it's kind of gorgeous right now. Yeah, it's kind of gorgeous. Did all my filming outside. I had a lot of filming I had to do these today for all of the sponsors to get the year started off right. So we'll be posting a lot of that. Hello, Mr. Tom. How you doing over there? That's my Texan right there. We got Steven on board. Tom McIntyre up cold up in northern Canada. Yeah, I can see that you're going to be kind of chilly right now. We've got Benny listening in from the YouTube channel, guys. Just a reminder, I am broadcasting from YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We've got Victor coming on board this evening. Chuck. Okay, Chuck, you need to send me your address and your t-shirt size because you were one of our winners from last week's College Park show. So you're going to get one of the cool rebuilt shirts, but you need to send me an email so that I can get your address and your t-shirt size. So I couldn't find you on Facebook or Instagram, even though I'm really great at finding people. Couldn't find you. So please send it to me. Okay. Email me. All right. What else we got here? We've got Beth coming in from Chiefland, Florida. You're in Florida right now, Beth. All right. Let's see who else we've got. We got Steven coming in from Cole, New York. Kim from Frozen, Indiana with hot cocoa in her hand. We got Scott coming in from West Virginia. Richard from Mission, Texas with his Pellegrino. Let's see who else. We got a lot of nice people here. I'm really loving this. We got Donna coming in from Wyoming, drinking her water. Yeah, Bob looks dead. Yeah, Bob and I had a long day of filming. If you guys saw, I tried making a funny reel about how I was setting up my set today as I was doing all the filming. And I realized one thing, that I am no good behind the camera. I stink at it. And I have a huge appreciation for anybody who works behind the camera with editing and videography and all that kind of stuff. I stink at it. I stink. When I win the lottery, I plan on buying myself a camera crew. Yeah, just going to do it. Hey there, Pastor David. Glad you could make it here. We've got Michelle coming in from Paw Paw, Michigan. Jerry Ann from Arizona drinking her cinnamon roll vanilla coffee. Y'all bring some good coffee. Jody, we're going to be sending out your t-shirt. And we got Rob coming. Y'all are just pouring in here. I'm loving this. Nothing yet, Kristen. I know. Speaking of my wonderful, amazing tech team, I got the head of my tech team listening tonight. So I got to behave myself and actually pretend like I know what I'm doing with all of my tech tonight. But we're going to start off tonight with one of the questions sent in by text message. Let's see. Who do we got? Let's start with. Okay, so someone sent in through the text message, what kind of things can you do to toughen up your stumps to wear prosthetic devices? Okay, so when it comes to preparing the residual limb, you know, and this still harkens back from like the 60s and the 70s, like the much older days when we had a much different approach to the residual limb and how we cared for the skin and also just the design of the sockets. You know, back in the 60s and 70s and prior to that, right? And I think I have one of my gentlemen here that has been wearing prosthetics for longer than that. Those prosthetic sockets, they just kind of tore you up. They would just tear up your skin, and they were pretty brutal on the skin. So people would, you know, try to toughen up their skin, like allowing their skin to develop calluses and things like that. Thankfully, our socket design has improved dramatically over the decades. And it's really interesting to see the evolution of how things have really changed. It's not perfect, right? We still have to do a lot of care for the skin, a lot of maintenance, but there's no need to quote unquote toughen up the skin the way it used to be. Okay. If anything, we don't want calluses forming. We don't want blisters forming on the skin. Okay. The best thing that you can do if you're getting ready to have a prosthetic device, if you've been cleared by your doctor, is to start strengthening your limb. Start taking care of what's going on the inside, not so much on the skin on the outside. Now, some people will say that they like to use desensitization techniques, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But the biggest prep work that you can do when it comes to getting ready for your prosthetic device, for your prosthetic leg, is to get to a physical therapist and start a strengthening and stretching program yesterday. Okay. The more you can prepare the strength in your residual limb and your sound limb and your entire body, preparing yourself, okay, the much smoother that transition will be to wearing a prosthetic limb. Okay. Now, there are some people that they're incredibly sensitive. Their residual limb is just super sensitive to the point where nobody can put a hand on it because they just see stars. In those cases, yes, I do recommend a desensitization protocol. And it's very, very simple. It doesn't involve anything too aggressive. Usually if the person, depending on how sensitive the person is, but on my really, really folks that are just kind of climbing the walls, I start with, first of all, just self-touch. Usually the person who can't tolerate someone else's touch can tolerate their own. So the person being able to give a gentle massage to their residual limb. And then after that, they can progress to something soft like a cotton ball or a cotton puff, and just kind of gently doing circles on the residual limb, starting at the distal end, at the very end of it, and working their way up. Okay. And again, it doesn't have to be a lot, just a couple of minutes a day, a couple of times a day. Okay. And then as you start to become a little bit more acclimated to that sensitivity, to that level, then you can progress and start, for example, with a warm terry cloth towel, something that has a little bit more texture. And again, usually I just recommend small circular motions with the pressure that you're able to handle, and just be consistent. Couple of minutes a day, a couple of times a day. Okay. Also, warm baths tend to also help with people who are very, very sensitive. Okay. What we don't want is to toughen up the skin with callousing or with abuse. There are some people who recommend like tapping, that they say that they, tapping on the residual limb, light tapping with their hands, because they feel like that also helps with the desensitization process. But that's after you've done like the cotton ball and the terry cloth. So as you get less sensitive, desensitized, then you can proceed to things like tapping and then like rubbing. Okay. But we want to take care of our residual and we don't want to abuse it. It's already been through enough. Okay. But again, if there's one thing I wish we could start to bring back into amputee care, it's what we call prehab. So rehabilitation that you receive before you get your prosthetic device. All right, let's see what we got. We got Pat listening in from Scituate. I don't even know where that is, with his IPA from a local brewery. We've got, oh, hey, Carol, it's good to see you. All right, let's see. Who's watching the Super Bowl? Who's watching the Super Bowl this Sunday? I know I'm just making chicken wings. That's all I know about the Super Bowl this Sunday. Who's your favorite team? We had a Reggie over here last week with College Park talking about all the different liners. And, he was wearing his Eagles jersey, and that caused quite a ruckus on the show from many of you, my viewers. So now that Reggie is not actually here, who are you guys rooting for? Let's go ahead and let's just get that out of the way. Let's just put that into the comment section right now. Carol's drinking her Yorkshire biscuit tea. That sounds fancy, Carol. All right, let's see what else we got. Let's look at another question while you guys are putting in your favorite football team and hopefully not starting too much trouble here on my comment section. Okay, we have another gentleman who came in through the text messaging and said, when I put my leg in the socket, sometimes I have pain, like it's loose. And then when I put socks on, it's just the same. I'm not sure if I'm putting on too many socks. Okay, and guys, Glenn jumping in right away with the Eagles. When it comes to learning how to use a prosthesis, right? Probably one of the most frustrating aspects is learning how to manage the residual limb volume. Okay. So many of you know that the residual limb is going to go up and down, up and down, up and down, right? Up to those first 2 years after amputation, as the tissues inside, oh gosh, I knew my comment section was going to start blowing up here. We got Eagles and Chief fans here. All right. So basically, with the 2 years after amputation, excuse me, while your leg is remodeling, the volume is going up and down. Okay. And when you start using your prosthesis and you become more active, right, the residual limb is going to shrink even more. And then you take the leg off and it puffs back up again. And it's kind of an endless cycle and something of a source of frustration. Okay. Managing socks is an art form. I'll just say it. It's an art form. And this is something that even with my most experienced amputees, I see that sometimes they struggle to figure that out. If you put your socket on and you feel like it's too loose then and you're feeling pain, then yes, the logical thing to do is to add a sock. And I usually tell people add one sock at a time, one ply at a time. I should be more specific about that. One ply at a time. Okay. So the socks come with different thickness that we call ply. It just depends on how thick the weave will be. So typically manufacturers will make a 1 ply, a 3 ply, a 5 ply, and I think I've even seen up to a 7 ply. Not very often, but every once in a while you see one of those. Okay. So obviously the higher up the number, the thicker the ply. So when someone is saying that their socket is loose, I'll tell them just do 1 ply at a time. Okay, so that you can fine tune it. Now, in the case of this person who sent me this text message, it could be that they're adding too many socks, okay, or they're not adding enough socks, okay. The point is, if they're still experiencing pain when their residual limb is going into the socket, they need to keep troubleshooting. Okay. Now, if they've already tried several different combinations, they've put on 1 ply, they took off a ply, they put on 2 ply, like they tried troubleshooting on their own, then yes, they definitely need to go see the prosthetist. There should be no pain associated with wearing a socket. Okay. And this is, again, one of those kind of archaic myths from a long ago, from the 60s and 70s, because back then, again, sockets were a lot more primitive than they are now, and they did cause pain, and there really wasn't a lot they could do about it. But nowadays we know better. We are designing better. We are engineering better. Okay. So pain in a socket is not acceptable, not acceptable. Usually when I have someone come to my clinic or someone come to see me, usually the pain is because of the socks not being managed properly. Okay. But it does get to a point, so that's usually the first thing we like to troubleshoot and teach the person how to use the socks. If if I'm working the socks and I'm not seeing anything different, then I know I need to start looking at the socket, perhaps start looking at the alignment of the prosthesis itself, and just see how the individual is doing there. All right, let's see. David says weight gain and loss will cause the same problems with socks and fit. Absolutely. I have one patient right now that he is trimming down his weight to his baseline level. He gained some weight after amputation, which is very common. And it's a pain because just when he feels like he's got a hang of his socks and his fit, he'll lose a couple of pounds more and then it throws everything off again. So it's very frustrating, especially when you're trying to and thankfully I work with a couple of amazing prosthetists here in the area, working with the prosthetist to see like, okay, how can we extend the life of this socket before jumping into a new one, and the cost of a new one, especially if we know that the person is going to continue shrinking dramatically. So it's an art form. It really is. Melissa, great question. She's asking, when is it too many ply? Okay, so textbook answer, hey Harsh, textbook answer is 15 ply. Okay. For me, 15 is just a little too much, honestly. I go by what my patient feels. So I have one patient right now. He's in about 13 ply and he's not a happy camper. He's losing that connection with the socket. He's losing that feeling of proprioception, and it's definitely throwing him off. And then in his particular case, it's like we really can't fine tune the socks anymore. If we put 13 ply on, he's feeling just a bit too snug. But if we back it off to 12 ply, it's too loose. And then he's also having some pain and discomfort and certain pressure points in the socket. So, his prosthetist and I agreed that, he's looking at a new socket pretty soon. But again, the key point there is that he's being limited in his balance and in his proprioception because of the 13 ply sock. Guys, I've had some people that they get to 6 to 8 ply and they're completely miserable because they're just so in tune. And usually it's my more active folks. I think I just chalk that up to the fact that people who are when they're more active, they're also more in tune to the feel and the connection of that socket, right? So they're going to be more sensitive to that socket being too full of socks. Okay. So Stephen, for example, says he's up to 19. Guys, let's do a quick cozy poll. I haven't done a cozy poll this evening. So while I take a sip of my water, tell me how many socks y'all are wearing. And those of you who are my osseointegration folks wearing smug grins right about now, you can take a sip of your drink too. Tate says, neither, not a huge fan of either team. No offense, everyone, just want a good time. Tate, you obviously did not see all the caterwauling that was going on last week on the show about all the football talk. Jill Beth says, I agree. Huge difference between 13 and 15 ply. Melissa's up to 8 ply. Steven's up to 19. Richard has 1 ply. That's a really good fit on your socket there, Richard. Jody has none. Woo. Harsh has 1 ply. Okay. Guys, I was joking around with the prosthetist the other day because we had one patient that they're just very, very sensitive to ply. And I looked at the prosthetist and I was like, look, if I was an amputee, I'd be one of those patients too. I would not be able to handle more than just a couple of ply. I think it would drive me insane to have all those layers on there. But again, everybody's different. I have one guy that I use him as an example all the time. His name is James, that he's been an amputee for over 30 years. He has a nice stable limb. It changes, but it's stable. So he can predict the changes. And he starts the morning off with 5, lunch 10, and by nighttime he's in 15 ply. But then the next day he wakes up and he's back in 5 ply again. And he's great. He plays golf. He's extremely active and he can handle it. Demily says, I don't think I have more than 3 ply. Chuck says, I got rid of those socks with the new socket we got last week. Beth has 1.5 ply there. Hey there, Robert from Livkind Foundation. Oh, and there's Ben Gregory. No, man, it's good to see you. Good to see you. All right. So yeah, guys, it's really feel. And this is something where, as a patient, I always encourage you to advocate for yourself. If you're having pain in your socket and you cannot figure it out, okay, that's what your prosthetist and your physical therapist are for. It's our job to figure it out and to help you figure that out. When it comes to how many ply you have in your socket, again, the hallmark thing is, are you feeling comfortable in your socket? If you are wearing 8 ply, Melissa, oh wait, she just said, I can't run anymore with 8. I can't wait to change the socket. Okay, so Melissa's already on it. She already knows that with 8 ply, game over for her, right? If you know that you're not feeling comfortable in the socket, your balance is off, you're just not feeling connected and you don't feel, tell your prosthetist. Tell your prosthetist, okay? Jody says, I'm in a temporary socket until later this week or early next week to get a permanent socket. Hallelujah, Jody. I'm glad. Guys, I'm only looking down here. I only need, okay, so we had, sorry, I promise I'm not distracted. I'm distracted for a very good reason. We had, I'm texting my tech team because they are supposed to be sending me the name of our $50 gift card winner. So for the past couple of weeks, I have been putting out a survey, an annual COSI Talk survey. And guys, this is something that I cannot tell you how much I appreciate everybody who has sent in a completed survey. I've been doing this now for the past, I think it's been like 3 or 4 years now. And usually I do it at the end of the year, but 2024 got a little sticky towards the end. So we're doing it early 2024 right now. But basically it's questions that I put in there, and it's also questions that my sponsors contribute. I like to call it really nice market research, and the sponsors want to know more about you and your needs the same way I do, right? I take a lot of the input that you guys give me on these surveys to heart when I'm planning out the year and also when I'm planning out the next year. Okay, because I like to hear about what is it that you guys like, what is it that you guys don't like. I check my ego at the door with that kind of thing. And you guys have always provided such thoughtful feedback, and I truly, truly appreciate it. So we did sweeten the pot a little bit, and one of my team members is frantically looking for the winner. So that we had picked out a winner. So she is going to find it for me. There we go. We got it. Okay. Cindy Price. Cindy, I don't know if you're watching right now, but if you are, congratulations. You are our winner. So I will be sending you a $50 Visa gift card. So obviously I have your email. Thank you for that. And I'll be reaching out to you to get your information and address so we can send this off to you. So again, guys, thank you so much. Here's a quick question. How many of you guys would like for me to share the results of the survey? Like next week, I have a huge show, so I can't do it next week, but the following week, our next general Q&A. Are you guys curious to hear about what the results of the survey were? Is this something that you guys are interested in, or you're just like, not so much? Believe me, I'm not going to be insulted either way. So put that in the comment section. Do you want to hear about the survey, or nah, let's keep it moving on? Let's see. Ben Gregory says he's got 1 ply, multiple socks feel loose to me. Yeah, Lori's got 5 ply, Kathy with 10 ply. And Lori just says she got a new foot 3 years since amputation. Wow. Dawn says, hey, Cozy Dawn from Canada. Good to see. Oh, Dawn, 12 on the left and 5 on my right. Holy cow. How's that left side feeling? Is it feeling like when you have such a huge discrepancy between both legs, Dawn, are you feeling a little bit off on one leg compared to the other? I'm very curious. Let's see. Stephen says, I just haven't come up with the money to get my second socket. And again, Stephen, I know that happens sometimes, and again, prosthetists are incredibly clever at stretching the life out on these sockets. One thing you might want to consider, and I'm just going to throw it out there, Stephen, again, I just try to offer some solutions. The Revo Surface. Okay. It's a kit that your prosthetist can order. And again, I don't know the cost out of pocket. So I'm sorry to say I don't know that cost. But it allows your prosthetist to build adjustability into the socket itself. And guys, I wish I could reach my socket. I had to kind of turn my studio around today because I had to do a lot of filming. So it's a big old mess right there. So I can't show it to you. But Stephen, it's something that here, it's called the Revo Surface. And it's by Click Medical. Okay. Lots of people on the show use their other product, the Revo Fit. But what I like about the Revo Surface is when someone is at that point where the socket is starting to be a little bit big, but maybe they're not ready for a new socket, or there's whatever there is going on, this is an option where they can build the adjustability into the existing socket. So again, it might just be something for you to have a conversation with your prosthetist to see, is this something that you can do or not? And to see if from a financial standpoint, if it might be a little less expensive than a new socket. Again, that's not something I'm an expert on. So just a conversation that you can have with your prosthetist. Let's see, what else we got? David says 6 ply and 10 ply neoprene pads, triple pads, and a Martin Bionic just got cast for a new socket yesterday, but it said it was about 20 ply in a standard socket. Yeah, sounds like you're ready for a new one there, David. Okay, so Robert wants me to share the results. Okay, Chuck wants me to share the results. Kim, Donna says yes. Jill says yes. Emily says yes. Glenn says yes. Okay, so I will share. So next week, guys, before I forget, huge show. With Integrum, one of my sponsors, longtime sponsors. They are the makers of the Oprah implant system. So it's a form of osseointegration. Sometimes people call it bone anchored. Some people call it osseo anchored. Most people know it by osseointegration. And my buddy boy Glenn is going to be on the show, and he's going to be telling his story. And I always have a very good time when I chat with Glenn. And also, literally, world famous surgeon Dr. Jonathan Forsberg is going to be coming on the show. Guys, I've wanted to have him on the show for a really long time. When I look back on the show and some of the surgeons that I've had, just through Integrum alone, if we were to have a dialogue about the top 10 orthopedic surgeons in the world, I've had a lot of them on my show, and Dr. Forsberg is one of those surgeons. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm not blowing sunshine. Like, this guy is world known for the work that he's done, and truly an amazing surgeon. And many of my viewers on this show have been patients of his. And I had the chance to meet him at a conference last November. So I'm really excited to have him really excited to have Glenn on the show to finally tell his story and just share his very practical advice. So guys, for those of you, osseointegration is not for everyone. I'm the first one to say it, and so is Integrum for that matter. But I think it's still good and important as an amputee just to be aware of the new surgeries, the new techniques, and the new technologies out there, whether or not it applies to you. And this show is also about curiosity. Right? I just found out recently that I have quite a few people who have no ties to the amputee community, that they just like watching the show because they just like learning something new. Go figure, right? So I thought that was kind of cool. So for those of you who are curious about osseointegration, want to ask your questions next week, you definitely want to come and do that. So yes, and guys, keep your eyes peeled because I love my giveaways, especially when the sponsors are on. So keep your eyes peeled for my social media and for my e-blast, and you'll get some information there. Let's see. Jody is asking feedback. Do other people feel like me when they enter a room to try to figure out where to sit because it's hard to get up? That's a really good question, Jody. And I'm willing to bet that the answer is yes. And I'm going to even take another educated guess and say that people specifically look for chairs to sit in a room that have arms. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk tonight. That have arms on the chair. I know that sometimes when I've worked with some of my bilateral amputees, and also even when I was working in home health, and I was working with my elderly population, I would always encourage them, look for the chair that has arms on it, good sturdy arms. Martin, you made it. Man, we got to figure out what's going on with your computer as to why you can't find the show. But I appreciate all the advice you've been giving. Don says, not really all the time, just got to keep my eye on it at all time to add the socks. Bravo to you, Don, because I know the job that you do is a tough one. All right, so Tom wants to hear the results too. All right, we'll do the results. For me, it's like opening up a Christmas present. Like I haven't peeked yet. Like I wait until all the surveys are in, and then I look at all the results and start reading through everything. So it's something I really enjoy doing because again, the show is for you guys, right? Show's for you guys. So whatever it is you guys want to see, we're going to try to figure it out to get it on. Let's see. Glenn is excited. I'm excited too. Eric, I'm glad you're resting up and behaving yourself. Let's see. Robert says, I sit at booths with the prosthetic side out. I didn't even think about that for restaurants. All right, let's go to the next question. Oh, so this was a really nice piece of advice. So a lovely lady by Denise sent me an email and said that she had just finished reading a post written by someone probably in the amputee Facebook support groups who didn't know how to, or who was struggling to get the jeans, her blue jeans on over the below the knee prosthesis, right? And Denise says that the New York Jeans Company, it's NYDJ, has a pair of jeans. Sorry, I just lost my shot there. That work. That apparently, I don't know if they're specifically designed, but I'll put the name of the jeans here because I do know NYDJ Original Slimming Jeans. Okay. I do know a lot of my ladies and my gentlemen struggle sometimes with finding clothing that can fit over the prosthesis, that makes it easy to access the prosthesis. And we're starting to see some adaptive clothing companies pop up here and there. Unfortunately, the one that we had on the show a few years back, I guess they went out of business because we never heard from them again. They had a really great women's pant that had zippers, hidden zippers, and it made it real easy. So whenever I find out about some sort of adaptive clothing or something that's just a little bit easier to make your life easier wearing over your prosthesis, I like to advertise it there. So guys, any of you guys have ideas, like any adaptive clothing companies, go ahead and put it into the comment section for men or women that you guys can recommend. Yeah, and when it comes to, and again, I've heard all sorts of hacks, and guys, put those hacks in there too, because y'all are way better with these hacks than I am. I know for putting on blue jeans, a lot of times folks will put on a garbage bag, over a plastic garbage bag over the prosthesis, and it helps slip the blue jeans up better. Thankfully, now the trends when it comes to blue jeans and pants is we're moving away from the skinny jeans and we're moving more into the wide leg jeans, which I think is also helping amputees who wear prosthetic devices. I know I like those kind of jeans better myself, but that's one of the ways to do it. Another way I recommend to my patients sometimes is to find themselves a good tailor, and honestly, any tailor who's hanging up a shingle can put in an invisible zipper on the inside seam of a trouser or a pant. And this goes for my ladies and my gentlemen, especially for those who are above the knee, where you want to have easy access to your prosthesis for whatever reason throughout the day. There we go. Robert says, I went to our local boot shop and they added zippers in my jeans. Yeah. And then Rolo says, what I did was javelin the local seamstress and put a zipper on the outside pant, and it works great. So guys, this is really true. Here's another, and I know this is going to sound like a kind of a weird hack, but just go with me on this one. I love vintage and antique. Like that's kind of my personal like thing I like to do. Probably one of the reasons why I love vintage and antique clothing is because things were just made better back, especially in the 60s and the 70s. The quality of clothing was better. And what I've been seeing a lot now, and guys, just go with me on this one. I'm seeing a lot of jeans and jean jackets but also jeans that were made by J.C. Penney and Sears in the 60s and 70s. Okay. The reason why I'm saying this is because I know it can be expensive to go to a tailor or a seamstress to get a zipper put in. And you want to make sure that when you do that, that the pants are going to last you, but those of you who, have a little knack for this, go to your local Goodwills and thrift stores. And if you find those kind of jeans that were made in the 60s and 70s by Sears or by J.C. Penney's, they're incredibly well made. And obviously, if they're going to be at a Goodwill or a thrift store, they're going to be a lot less expensive. So I know I have just these weird little Jeopardy factoids that I put out there sometimes, but just thought I'd share that. I kind of learned that up recently. Let's see. Steve says, I'm wearing work pants with the pockets. There you go. Kim says, I cut up the inside seam and I hand sew Velcro on the inside. That's a really great idea, Kim. And hand sewing Velcro up and down a full pant leg. God bless you. That is a lot of work. And I'm staring at my sewing machine now. I like my sewing machine. Okay, let's see what else. All right. And I'm not seeing many of you guys put up names of adaptive clothing companies, and that's telling me something right there. Robert says, I'm lucky our boot shop saw my leg and offered to put the zippers in for free so I could wear boots. Oh, that is awesome. That is super cool because that's a lot of hard work to put a zipper into a boot, into a leather boot. Okay. Okay. So this question came in from Martin. He says, I'm a right BK. I've had my prosthesis for 2 weeks now, and I keep struggling with having a sore area on the end of my stump directly under the bone, which now has a blister. The area around it is extremely sore. Are there any quick tips? I've contacted my doctor and my prosthetist, who I will see tomorrow. And I do apologize, Martin, that I did not see. There were a couple of text messages that came in last week that unfortunately I missed. Yes, so this goes hand in hand with what we were discussing earlier, in the sense that there should be no pain, no skin breakdown, none of that happening, okay, while you're wearing a prosthesis. You are probably at your most vulnerable in those first few weeks when you get your prosthetic device. A lot of it is usually because people get excited finally about having the prosthetic device and they might jump into wearing it too long, too quickly. Okay. So if you have not been put onto a wearing schedule, this is something that your prosthetist and your physical therapist should be talking to you about, on how to gradually acclimate your leg to wearing a prosthetic device, specifically for these reasons, so that you don't tear up your residual limb. It's very similar to when you have a pair of new stiff leather boots, right? You can't wear them 8 hours a day or you're going to have a foot full of blisters, right? You have to slowly wear it in so that the leather kind of softens up and your skin kind of slowly gets used to it without developing breakdown, okay? And to me, a callus is also considered to be breakdown, okay? If you're feeling that pain specifically on the bottom, then it means you're bottoming out. Okay. When you wear your prosthesis, the end of your residual limb should be in contact, okay, with the bottom of the socket, but it should not be pushing, right? It should just feel very gentle. You should just be feeling it and be aware of it, but it should not be pushing against it. The end of your residual limb is not meant to take the weight of your body. And a lot of people really don't get that. I have a lot of doctors that they don't know this, okay? The end of your limb is not meant to carry the weight of a prosthesis, okay? The only exceptions to this, okay, and I'm going to name a couple because people are going to come at me and be like, but Kosi, okay, so I'm going to tell you what the exceptions are, okay? If you have an ERTL procedure as a below the knee amputee, and if you have an ERTL, you know you have an ERTL procedure. And it's a special way of doing the amputation where the surgeon creates a bony bridge between the two bones in the lower leg. Okay. And the purpose of that is so that the person can then bear weight on the end of their limb. But that's not a very common procedure. And that, again, if you've had the ERTL, you know you've had the ERTL. Okay. The other people that can weight bear on the end of their residual limb are people who have had a Symes amputation, meaning that they had the foot removed, but the ankle bones still remain, and then there's a heel pad at the bottom, okay? Or people who are knee disarticulation, meaning they had the tibia and the fibula removed, but the entire femur is still intact, including these little knobby parts right here called the condyles, okay? And again, if you fall into that category, you know about it. You know who you are, okay? So if you're asking yourself, am I supposed to be bearing weight on the end of my limb? Then no, you're not. You're not one of those people because you would know if you were. Harsh says, I wear Eddie Bauer zip convertible short pants. Those are kind of cool. Those pants that convert into like cargo pants and then they unzip and they can go into shorts. Those are pretty cool. Yeah. So Martin, and here's the thing, when you have breakdown, and I say when, because at some point in your life as an amputee, I don't care how good you are and how good your skin is, at some point in your life as an amputee, you're going to have something, whether it's a blister or something more serious, hopefully not more serious. Cardinal rule is you got to take off the leg. Okay. And for me, that's probably one of the few things that I have kept strict about from when I first started practicing as a therapist over 20 years ago to now. Okay. A lot of other things I've kind of, adjusted my way of thinking of it, but that one to me is still a hard no. If you have a blister, if your skin has broken down, you need to take the prosthesis off. And it's for two reasons. Number one, your skin needs to heal. And I don't care how comfortable, how much padding you put on it, bandaging, whatever. If you keep putting your leg on when you have broken skin, you're going to keep breaking that skin and not giving it a chance to heal. Okay. Number two, obviously there's something going on with that socket, whether it's because you're not putting the right amount of socks on or there's something in the actual socket itself that's causing your skin to break down. So it's going to keep causing it to break down if you keep putting it back on. Okay. So two-part thing. So Martin, let that skin heal. Let that skin heal. And then you need to review with your prosthetist your wearing schedule. And you need to review with your prosthetist your sock management. Okay. Because it sounds like you were bottoming out, which means you probably needed to add more socks. Thumbs up. All right, guys. Gosh, I hate it when that happens. See, this is why I need a co-host like Reggie, so that when my brain goes and I forget what I'm going to say, I can have someone like Reggie jump in for me. Robert says, infections are our worst enemy. Please keep blisters clean and dry. Yes, yes. I did wound care for many, 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 many years. So my amputee patients get it from me from both barrels. If they come in with any kind of skin abrasion or skin breakdown, because it just puts a hard stop on everything. And some of these, especially if you are diabetic, if you have autoimmune disease, if you have any of these vascular issues, you are going to be more prone to infection. And that's just no bueno. No bueno. Hey there, Bill. Good to see you. All right, let's see what else is going on. Ooh, here was a good question. All right, this question came in from Maria. Maria says, I was hoping you may be able to help me with something. I'm a bilateral Below the knee amputee, 23 and 24 surgeries. Wow. I've recently just received my second prosthesis, but my calf will not stop firing and it feels like it's tense all the time. Is there any way to relax this muscle? I'm not even walking yet, just building a wearing pattern, but it happens whether I'm in my prosthesis, liner, or nothing. Okay. So again, I'm going to have to play armchair quarterback on this one because this is one of those things where there could be many reasons that a calf muscle is still firing on a person like that, just like constantly on. And it's one of those things where you got to be right there to kind of really figure out what's going on. But first of all, considering that she's a bilateral below the knee amputee, it means that her body is going to be under that much more stress, right? It's going to require a lot more energy out of her to wear prosthesis, to walk with a prosthesis, right? So specifically, what's left of her calf muscles, they're going to be going on and on and on and on, okay? So a couple of things can cause the muscle to keep firing like that. And usually it's weakness. A lot of times when these muscles are weak and they're just struggling to keep up, right? And they're constantly firing, they're going to get worn out, okay? Now, in the case of the calf muscle, right, when you have that amputation, that muscle is cut to a length much, much shorter than what it was intended to be. So it's going to be less efficient at contracting. Okay. And then on top of that, right, I'm willing to bet nuts to knickers that her quads and hamstrings and glute muscles are also going to be weak, right? Very, very common in below the knee and above the knee amputees. So if the glute, the quads, and the hamstring muscles are weak, okay, calf muscle is going to try to keep compensating for it. So it's really going to try to keep picking up the slack. Okay, when you have an entire leg, these back muscles are providing a lot of power when you walk. So the shorter you go on that amputation, the more that responsibility is going to fall on the remaining muscles. And usually after an amputation, these remaining muscles, they haven't gone with the program yet, right? That's where your neighborhood friendly PT comes into play to get them strong enough to carry that weight. Okay, so that's one thing that could be causing her calf muscles to keep firing. The other thing that can be happening, and I see this a lot in my below the knee amputees, is the socket. Okay, a lot of times people will get very aggressive with their socks. Again, it's those first few months of figuring out how to manage your limb volume and your residual limb volume and sock management, and it is incredibly frustrating. But a lot of times I'll have people come in and they're practically being strangled in their socket, right? That poor little residual limb is just like, help me. Like it's just like super, super squeezed in there. And it's either because the person put too many socks on, or, the prosthetist may have just kind of designed it just a little too tight. Okay. And that does happen, guys. Okay. So I always tell people the socket should feel like a hug, like a snug hug that you give somebody that you know. Okay. Not the kind of hug that you give a stranger or somebody you just meet. Someone like a loved one that you give, right? A snug hug. It should not be a super tight hug. Okay. And it shouldn't be the kind of hug that you give somebody you just meet, like a loose hug. It should be a nice, snug hug on the socket. So that's another thing. Usually also the person will complain that they might feel a little bit of pins and needles or just kind of little fuzzy sensation in the residual limb. Okay. So those are kind of the main ones there. And when it comes to below the knee amputees, and I kind of mentioned this to this individual and I wrote them back, you really want to be very careful about anything being too tight. Okay. So behind your knee, okay, for those of you who are my below the knee amputees, you have major blood vessels, big ones, right? You have a popliteal vein and a popliteal artery, big, fat, juicy vessels, right? And they're just in a vulnerable place. Okay. Many of you, when you have a liner that's too thick and bunching up and it just feels like really uncomfortable back there. Okay. It's because you're pushing up on a lot of those vessels. Okay. So if you have a socket that is just chronically tight, okay, you're going to start to run into some of those issues. Okay. So again, these are just some things. And then also last, but certainly not least, nutrition. That's another big one right there. And that's something I'm becoming a little bit more vocal about on the show in terms of managing your nutrition as an amputee. Okay, so if you have muscles and you're having a lot of muscle cramping, it's time to take a look at your hydration. And are you getting the right nutrients and minerals, specifically electrolytes such as salt, magnesium, and potassium into your diet? Yes, and that's a really great way of saying it, Bill. Referencing it as a blood pressure cuff scenario. Yeah, yeah. So it's Goldilocks. So you don't want too much pressure. You don't want too little pressure. You want just right, just right. Uh, Bill's asking, do I suggest a wet to dry bandaging? It all depends on what I see. It all depends on what I see on the wound. The wet to dry bandages, usually those are being used when I have like a really bigger wound, usually for something small, like a blister or a small open area. I'm not thinking so much about a wet to dry bandage. I'm usually thinking more of just keep it clean and keep it open to air. There's a cardinal, and this is an old saying, like what people who worked in wound care, if it's wet, dry it. If it's dry, wet it. If you know what it is, leave it alone. If you don't know what it is, then you really leave it alone, right? Referring to the nature of a wound. So sometimes when you look at a wound, if it looks really, really wet because of stuff going on in the wound, then you use certain agents or certain dressings to try to dry it out. Likewise, if you see a wound that's way too dry and it's preventing that new tissue from granulating and going in, then you have to use certain agents to wet the wound. And that will just be different depending on the kind of wound that you're looking at. We got Carl coming in from Taiwan. Good morning to you. Yeah, no, and definitely your nutrition will play a huge role in limb volume in terms of that. Yeah, I think we're all guilty of not hydrating enough. So this is why I brought my it's a freaking bathtub sized water bottle that I have here. Okay, let's take a look at some of these other questions and see what I got. Okay, here we go. Actually, this kind of piggybacks on the question I just answered. This one is coming from Shell. Shell asks, I'm a left below the knee amputee and I'm having issues with my prosthetic leg. The symptoms I'm experiencing are numbness when wearing my prosthetic while walking for exercise and what feels like heaviness or swelling. Pain starting behind my knee, which alleviates when I take the prosthetic off. I went to a prosthetist, which was new to me, and all she did was add some shims to help with the pain on my tibia, but it did not address my concerns. I need to know if my concerns are valid and if I need to find someone else to help me. Yes, your concerns are valid, Shell. And I'm sure my internet sleuths right now are going, ooh, we know the answer, right? So again, this piggybacks on what I just said, for my below the knee amputees, especially. If you're having changes in sensation when you're walking in your socket, that's no bueno, right? So, Shell was mentioning that when she wears her socket and she's walking in it, she's feeling feelings of numbness, and it kind of persists a little bit after she takes the socket out. Numbness usually means nerves. Something's going on with those nerves right there. And usually in this case, it might mean that it's being compressed. And then she says what feels like heaviness or swelling and pain starting behind the knee. Again, these are symptoms of nerve compression. It's also symptoms of vascular compression. So remember how I said you got those popliteal arteries and vein running behind the back of your knee. If that's getting compressed, it's also going to give you that sensation of numbness, heaviness, swelling. Okay. And again, we want to protect the back part of our knees. Okay. This is unfortunately also where clots can develop. Okay. So that's something we want to make sure we have good circulation going through there, that area can just kind of breathe well. Right. Yeah. And again, prosthetists, for the most part, they're going to want to try when they have a patient who's coming in with issues with the socket, unless it's something incredibly dramatic. A prosthetist is going to just want to kind of make a very small adjustment, right? They don't want to go changing too many things or too many crazy things in a socket because it can actually cause more problems down the line. So it sounds like this prosthetist maybe just added a simple padding somewhere to see if it would alleviate the pressure. It's not working. So yes, Shell needs to go back to her prosthetist and let them know it's not working. Okay. Because what I don't like hearing is that there's a change when she's wearing her leg versus when she's not wearing her leg. Okay. Some folks out there, especially my diabetic folks, they might have neuropathy. So it could be that they have already pre-existing numbness And that's just their baseline. That's normal for them. But what's not normal is for that to develop when you put on your leg and you're having more activity. You should not be having numbness or pain or heaviness or swelling like that. Nope. And I just realized I have not been checking back in on my Instagram, folks. We got Janie says, how do you calculate your BMI as an amputee with the prosthesis on or off? Off. So Janie, actually, I posted a video not too long ago of my bilateral below the knee amputee patient, where it was a simple video. It wasn't anything fancy, just showing how to weigh himself. So in the video, you see him weighing himself on a traditional scale with his prosthetic legs on. And then I had him sit down. Had him take off his legs, and this included his shoes, his socks, his liner, everything that he was wearing. And then I weighed that separately, and that weighed 15 pounds. Okay. And that basically, so we could get an understanding of what his baseline weight is. So if you're doing something like BMI, it's because you're trying to calculate, body fat ratio and things like that according to your height. Now that's going to be off in some ways because you are missing a limb. And to me, that's only just kind of one measurement. It's only one measurement of, the health of the person in terms of whether or not they are at a healthy weight. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Your BMI, it's more about, what is your sizing? What is your body fat composition? What is going on the inside of your body there? And that's a whole nother, one thing I have, it's called an in-body scan. I think that's what it's called. And it's usually at these like specialty med spa places, but it's a scan and it is incredibly accurate. It even tells you by body part the composition of fat to muscle ratio. And it's a fairly accurate, and it's not a very expensive exam. I think I have it done once a year, and it's at one of these local med spas. You just go in, and I think it's like a $35 exam. And you just stand on the scale, and it just kind of does this measurement, and it's fairly accurate. I have a lot of colleagues who are in the nutrition field, in the healthcare industry, that they like to use this particular to help track their patients' progress. Let's see. Is iodine recommended? Not in all cases, William. Again, it really depends on what is going on with the wound. Usually with these superficial wounds, usually that's what I see with my amputees, is just something that's superficial, that I try not to mess around with it. At most, maybe we'll use a little bit of backcitracin, but the main thing is just kind of keeping it clean, keeping it open to air if possible. If not, putting it under a loose bandage so it can still breathe. When you're getting into more of the what's more of an ulcer, like a stage 2 ulcer, a stage 3 ulcer, then you're talking about something a lot different, because you're getting into more deeper into that epidermis and a little bit more into the dermis area. So that's another ball game. And honestly, that it is so dependent on whether it's a venous ulcer, an arterial ulcer, if there's infection involved, if there's necrotic tissue there's a lot going on there. So I usually don't like to make a general recommendation, like whether or not you use iodine or something like that. That's, usually I kind of save that for more specific things. Let's see. Maria says, I get that tibia pain and the pads don't work, but if I put the pad on my tibia, it does help. We'll see what my leg lady says on the 18th. Yeah. And Maria, don't ever kind of doubt yourself. I think a lot of people sometimes I've had some patients tell me that they don't want to sound like they're complaining to their prosthetist. But guys, that's your prosthetist's job, is to make your leg comfortable. That is the sole purpose of their profession, is to make you a functional leg. Okay. The sole purpose of my profession is to get you moving. Right? That's our job. Okay. So they can't make your leg well unless you're communicating with them. So if there's a solution that they tried with you and it's not working, or it's not really making that much of a difference as you were hoping it would, keep going back. And Maria, I've had some, again, it's part science, part art, and it's a lot of guess and check, a lot of trial and error, and trying new solutions for these things. Okay. Hey there, Keith. Yes, and they do take forever to heal some of these ulcers. Yeah, depending on what's going on. Okay, let's see, let's see, let's see. Ooh, I think I covered all the questions. All right, guys, it looks like I covered all the questions for tonight. So just a couple of quick housekeeping reminders. Next week on Wednesday, we are going to have Integrum in the house with Glenn Runyon and Dr. Forsberg. And guys, you do not want to miss this one. This is going to be a really great show. It's going to be a really great show. So keep your eyes out for giveaways and e-blasts and everything. And guys, if I can ask one favor, if you guys have not already done so, please sign up for my text messaging services. This is a really great way for me to be able to keep in touch with you. It's also a great way for you to be able to send me your text messages. I also, tonight I wasn't able to do it because something went screwy with the service, but we're going to get that fixed. I also text you the links whenever I go live. So it's really easy. Text COSI Talks, all one word, all caps, to that number. Okay. Really trying to push that a little bit more this year because, again, just a great communication tool. It's just so much easier this way for me. So if you guys please can do me a favor, if you have not already signed up for the texting service, please do so. And feel free to share this on your platforms as well. And for those of you who are already a part of it, thank you. Mary, there's my girl. All right, guys, I will see you then. With that being said, thank you for letting me be a part of your lives this evening. And I will see you next week. Same